The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Welcome to Aging Like a Badass. I'm Kimberly Price, your 40-something host, and I'm on a mission to create the trusted spaces to help you navigate life's wrinkles. Hide from uncomfortable conversations? Not a chance. The raw and real is the rocket fuel that ignites change, and there is no better time than the present to excavate the messy and activate your inner superpower to create a life you love. So stick around and get ready to learn the tips, tricks, and truths to age like a badass, because wrinkles aren't the problem, they're the solution.
Welcome back to Aging Like a Badass. I'm really excited. Today we have special guest Morgan Adams. Morgan is a holistic sleep coach for women who struggle with getting a good night's sleep consistently. Her goal is to help women feel better and live better. And the key to both begins with a good night's sleep. Morgan, I'm going to have you come on because I want you to share a little bit more about who you are. You've had an incredible journey, and we're super excited that you're in the studio today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you. And I love the title of the show, Aging Like a Badass.
I know. Wrinkles aren't the problem. They are the solution.
I mean, that's pretty brilliant. I love that. I love that so much. Well, my story goes back to probably starting in my mid-30s. I developed insomnia, and it was pretty bad. And I won't go into how I got it, but basically it was a personal crisis in my life. A romantic crisis. I'll spare you the details. But we can all relate to those. But in any case, this created a bout of insomnia for me. And I had something called sleep onset insomnia, which basically means you get in bed and you lie there awake, struggling to fall asleep. In my case, it was up to 2 hours. Wow. And as you can imagine, it was very, very frustrating. So at some point, I went to my doctor and I was given sleeping pills, Ambien. I'm sure everyone's heard of that by now. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't know much about sleeping pills at all, but I was very desperate at the time to get some sleep. So I took the pills for 8 years, pretty much consistently 8 years, almost every night. And it did help me fall asleep a little bit more quickly, but the next day, I had such a great amount of grogginess, brain fog. Mm-hmm. I didn't actually feel like I was fully awake till close to lunchtime. And it did actually impact me on different levels, especially with my job. I had a kind of job back then where I had to be on at a moment's notice to respond to a crisis situation by writing something. So there were several instances where I couldn't come up with the words, couldn't type fast enough. And it created pressure for me in my job, but I just really didn't know what to do other than take the pills. So I kept taking them. And about 8 years into taking the pills, my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, said to me, we were just starting to date at the time. And he said, when you take those pills before you go to bed, you kind of turn into a zombie. Mm-hmm. And it freaks me out a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just got called out, but in the most kind way possible. And that got me really thinking about stopping taking the pills. I'd thought about it before, but I didn't have the courage. But at that moment, I felt like I had the courage to cut ties with the pills. And I mm-hmm. did. And I definitely don't recommend anyone doing this on their own as far as taking themselves off a sleeping pill. It can be very stressful. It can be dangerous for some people. Mm-hmm. So if somebody is out there and they're contemplating getting off their sleeping meds, I highly recommend going to your primary care provider or whoever prescribed the pill for you in the first place and having them guide you through a schedule to get off the pills, like a tapering off schedule. Also, it's very helpful to have a sleep coach in your corner as well to provide the accountability and support, because you really do need that, as well as the medical guidance. So long story short, I did get off the pills by myself, and I slept pretty decently for years. Then there was the plot twist. And that plot twist was
leads us to why now you get to talk about what the gift of sleep has been.
Yes.
Because in that journey, would you say over that period of time, and I think it's important, and I love going deep fast, because we get to see where a person has been, and then we get to talk about, where the journey has led you and where you're going, and how these, I don't know, I feel like our journeys are meant to be shared because they offer advice to those who maybe are just setting out on the journey and they don't know any different. And they don't have opportunities to reach out and do the things that now you've been able to do, and experience things in life in the ways you've been able to experience them, because now you have tools and resources and time and wisdom that you get to share. And that's why I was so excited to have you as a guest today, is to talk about the things that you're doing today and the gifts that, having been where you've been, the struggles, the things you've learned from that. So we've fast forward. So 8 years. This was 8 years of your life, and very young when it started.
I was 35 when it started.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was, the plot twist I referred to was the pandemic starting. In March of 2020. I was having trouble sleeping, and I got very concerned because I did not want to go back to insomnia, because I didn't want to, that was not a good place to be for me. So I started to go on Google, research how to sleep better, picked up tips here and there, accessible tips. And I started to implement them. I got myself an Oura ring, a sleep tracker that I wear on my finger. And I started to turn things around for my sleep. And I was so very excited about that I started to post about it online organically, just like the way people share on Facebook. I found this cool thing and look what I'm doing. And people were like, wow, I'm struggling with sleep too. Thanks for the tip. And so about the end of 2020, I had a revelation. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I said, I have to make this my life's mission. I felt so compelled to share on a broader level, on a deeper level, my passion for sleep with other people and help them get their sleep back on track. And so that's where the idea of my whole business came. Now I had been a breast cancer survivor, actually twice. And
Superwoman.
I knew from my first diagnosis, which was in 2018, that I wanted to help other women with their health. And I briefly considered becoming a cancer coach, like a breast cancer coach. But then I kind of thought that could be a little heavy, just dealing with cancer day in and day out.
Yeah.
So I put that idea on hold, but still in the back of my head, I was like, I still need to find a way to help women with their health. And sleep was the ticket for me, because I realized on such a profound level that it was the foundation of health as we know it.
Yeah. So would you go as far as to say, in your opinion, and I'm going to say expert opinion, do you feel like sleep is the number one thing that someone could start with to change their health, to better their health?
I do. So we think about the 3 pillars of health: sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And if you're not sleeping well, you are not able to regulate your hunger, and you're not able to have the impulse control at times to make good food choices. You're also not able to have the energy to work out. So really, if you want to have, a healthy body, you really do need to look at your sleep to make that happen. It is definitely the foundation. And I feel like for so long, sleep has been like the redheaded stepchild of all the pillars, and has gotten sort of like last billing. You look up, nutrition and exercise on Google, and you'll see so much information. you'll see so many professionals offering their services, nutritionists and personal trainers, but you really don't see a lot of people offering help with sleep. There's far fewer people, far fewer specialists helping folks with sleep. And it's really a shame, even to the fact that primary care doctors only get about 2 hours of sleep science training in medical school, which is shocking considering that we're sleeping a third of our lives. I mean, they really need to understand a lot more than just what a 2 hour, course or what have you could teach them.
Yep. I'm jotting down questions that I have for you because my mind is like, oh my goodness, I have so many things I want to ask you.
Yes, there are lots of questions that could be asked about this topic for sure.
Yeah. So one thing that I keeps kind of going through my head is, I agree. This has been something that I've never had insomnia. For me, it's always been my guilt-free time as a mom for the last 20 years has been when the kids go to bed. So I spent years when the kids would go to bed, at little people, maybe 7:30, 8. Now it's later, of course. That was my time, whether it started at 8:30 or it started at 10:30 or 11:30. It was my time for as long as I could go to stay awake and get my stuff done, things I wanted to do, and not things I had to do, just as a creative, as a visionary, as someone with ADHD. Oftentimes during the day, it didn't work for me. And it didn't work because if I wasn't able to have an open window of time that was long enough, I just wouldn't get started. Because as someone with ADHD, it was troublesome to me. It was overwhelming. It made me feel like I was going to panic to sit down with a task that I couldn't finish. And so rather than starting it and having, putting it away for later and picking it back up, I just wouldn't start it at all. So I would stay up all night long until my eyes were like, I looked like one of those cartoon characters. And I'd go to bed at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning and back up at 6 o'clock to go again. And years I did this, not because I couldn't sleep, because I chose not to sleep.
Yes. This is actually so common, more common than I think a lot of people realize. And there's a couple terms for it that I've heard. One is revenge bedtime procrastination. And then one is even more specific called momsomnia.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'll explain why these things happen. And it's because we do, like you as a mom, for example, you're doing so much for your family all day long. And maybe at your job at that point, if you had a job where you had to report to somebody, you're constantly dealing with other people's demands, right, during the day. And you have very little time for yourself. And so what happens is when you finally have that time for yourself, and usually in the evening, you kind of act like a rebellious teenager and say, I'm going to stay up as long as I damn well please.
Yeah.
Right?
Or can.
Because you can.
Yeah.
And so for these situations, what I recommend is that women, and I don't want to say it's always women, but I see mostly women. So I'm just going to say I recommend that women during the day take time for themselves, do something at least once during the day that brings you joy. And that may be taking a walk. That might be, I don't know, it could be scrolling Instagram. It could be watching a YouTube video or meditating or whatever. But whatever brings you joy, do that once a day and try to take small breaks for yourself as often as you can, just to decompress and have time for yourself. Because I think that strategy will make you feel like you took time for yourself, so that you don't need to like grab it all like once the kids go to bed. Right. And then, another thing that's a little bit more tactical is at the end of the day is before you start into your tasks at night, like whatever you're doing that's keeping you up, is make a really conscious decision. Like, this is the time at which I'm going to shut things down and start a wind down routine. And usually the best way to do that is just by setting an alarm on your phone. So let's say, for example, you want to be in bed by 10 o'clock, right? So you set a 9 o'clock alarm on your phone. And that alarm basically says, hey, Kimberly, shut it down, like shut down what you're doing and like start getting into relaxation mode.
Yeah.
Start, whatever that wind down routine looks like for you, start going to that place. Right?
So I want to interrupt you for just a second. I wrote down why. I think it's important to really talk about why it's so important to do these things for ourselves, because it wasn't until I realized, and you know this as a breast cancer survivor, it wasn't until it clicked and I understood the implications of what I was doing to myself. And there's multiple that we can discuss, but from a cancer standpoint, your body doesn't heal if you're not sleeping.
Exactly.
You aren't walking around during the day with all the things you have going on in the environment and being awake and the stresses in your head and all of the things. Your body cannot heal without rest. And so it's the number one thing for a cancer survivor to do is to take extra time to rest and sleep.
Absolutely. 100% on that. Yes.
Yeah.
And, even for the people who don't have cancer, I mean, it's just, most of us are working. And if you are not prioritizing your sleep, the next day, your productivity will suffer.
Yeah.
So it really does make a lot more sense to call it a day a little bit earlier, get that rest so that you wake up the next day refreshed and you've got the focus, you've got the drive and the creativity to devote to whatever you're committed to doing the next day.
Well, and you think about things, regenerative things. You work out at the gym, you break down your muscles. Your muscles don't heal if you don't sleep. So
absolutely,
when we get back to your why, whether it's health or it's healing or it's, you're training for a marathon or you're, wanting to build muscle for, something specific, or you're an athlete and, you've got a big game coming up or games coming up. We need sleep to regenerate. So you've talked about energy. We talk about physical, actual cellular healing that has to happen. And then one thing I want to dive into with you is, and women, you don't have to be, female listeners out there, you don't have to be in your 40s or 50s to listen to this. I would actually say if you're in your 20s and you're hearing this, stay tuned, because when you're searching for the fountain of youth, sleep is the fountain of youth. When we talk about anti-aging, less wrinkles, and this is all backed by science, less wrinkles, less gray hair, less bags under your eyes, droopy, skin that we get, fat, increase in fat when we don't sleep. So as you enter your 30s and hit perimenopause, because that's when we hit perimenopause, then you're going to move into, a little bit deeper perimenopause and hormonal changes. And then you'll hit menopause. Sleep aids all of that.
You nailed it. Absolutely. And another thing that I'll just kind of expand on is, and this, I don't think this is talked about as much, but just the implications of our own social fitness. So when we are well slept, we are better able to empathize with our partners, our colleagues, our friends. We're going to be more willing to solve conflict and to be open with each other. I mean, if you just think about, I think everyone can relate to this scenario. If you've had a bad night of sleep and you wake up the next morning and you've got a partner, you might snap at that partner. Imagine if you were constantly doing that, what toll that might take on your relationship. Or if you go into work cranky because you didn't sleep well, that you could develop a negative, reputation at work as being the cranky one, but you're just you're really underslept.
Yeah.
So I think that the whole concept of how sleep can help our social relationships definitely needs to be talked about a lot more than it has been, I think.
Yeah. And depression.
Yes.
So all of the mental, we talk about mental illnesses and struggles that people are having.
Yes. There is a huge bidirectional relationship with sleep and mental illness, especially depression and anxiety. And in fact, there's not one mental health issue that is not impacted in some way by sleep. Mm. So that's a great thing to underscore, is the importance of, sleep on our mental health in general.
Yeah. So what do we do if I'm someone listening today and I said, I love this. I have a why. I don't, I have 4 kids. I'll just use myself. I have a why. I have 4 kids. I need energy for my kids. I need energy for my spouse. I run a business. I have all these things I want to do. My health is really important to me. I'm definitely perimenopausal, be heading into menopause in the next few years. I don't want to look 90 at 50. All these things, huge whys, but I can't sleep. My hormones are out of whack, and my mind doesn't stop racing, and I can't sleep, Morgan. So I love that you're telling me this, but I can't sleep.
Yeah, you've hit a very, very poignant issue, one that I hear all the time. And so for the people who, like in your situation before, you were willingly not letting yourself sleep, but for I'm usually dealing with the people who want to sleep and they are having trouble. Like you're saying, a lot of menopausal women are struggling. Women in general are struggling more with their sleep than men are, unfortunately. We have fluctuating hormones, that's kind of at the top of the list as to why, from teenage years to menopause, fluctuating hormones. I mentioned earlier about the mental health issues. Women are more prone to mood disorders, depression and anxiety. So that can affect us as well. And then, one other thing is our societal roles as women are so, they can be so stressful. Like a woman your age, my age, 40s and 50s, we could have children at home. We could have aging parents. We could be at the top of our career game, and so many competing demands on our time that does create that anxiety and stress. And so I feel like in my client population, one of the things that we end up working on the most is the anxiety and the stress, because I think there are a lot of tools that we have at our disposal that can help us mitigate that stress, for sure.
I would say stress is probably, outside of physiological variances in hormones, which it's kind of like a circle. So I have these discussions also with people often. Which do you tackle first? So do I go in and do I pay the thousands of dollars to get the testing to tell me that I'm perimenopausal and my hormones are all over the place and my cortisol is this, and all of the things are just not where they should be, which is causing me then to not be able to sleep? Or do I start to work on the things outside of just medicating, which sometimes we need medication to put a fire out? I mean, sure. There's always a place for medication, so don't discount that. But I always like to encourage people, if you're going to go on a medication, have a plan of when you're going to get off it. And you need to have a support route, a journey along the way that's going to help rebalance the things that are unbalanced. And that's why we're needing the medication. And then, at that point, we either reduce and or get off if possible, yes. to do that. And so yes. Where do we start with that? And I love that you talk about, you work with women and or men on first mitigating stress, because yes. as we start to learn to do that, it's our bodies will start to rebalance themselves.
Yeah, I like what you said. But I'm actually a big fan of trying to work with the things that are within our control. And we have a lot of tools at our disposal. Yeah. And once we've kind of exhausted those tools, I feel like that's when we can kind of take another step and look into maybe supplementation or hormone replacement therapy or some kind of medical intervention. But we have so much that we can use. And I'll share a few things that have been extremely impactful with my clients. And the first thing I'll mention is getting sunlight in the morning. I know it sounds extremely basic and fundamental, but it makes such a difference. So I'll kind of explain the science behind why that's so important. So when we wake up in the morning and we can get outside within, as soon as possible as we wake, and expose our eyes that are not protected by sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What we want to have happen is we want to have the sunlight hit our retina, because when that sunlight hits our retina, it sends a signal to our suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our circadian pacemaker. And once that happens, there's this whole cascade of hormone and neurotransmitter shifting that happens. So the melatonin from the night before gets shut down, your serotonin increases, your cortisol increases to give you energy. So it's like an automatic reset for every morning. And it makes such an incredible difference to people. So you really only need about 10 minutes of that a day. And you can, if you have a pet, a dog, like take them for a walk, they'll be happy. You're going to get, your hormone balancing in with the natural sunlight, as well as, and this is not talked about enough either, is waking up at the same time every day. Mm-hmm. That again, definitely strengthens your circadian pacemaker. Our bodies and brains love regularity. So those are like some basic things for the morning that I really encourage my clients to jump on. And they usually see some shifts when they do that on a consistent basis.
So I live in Iowa. I'm going to ask you some obvious questions so the listeners, if they're thinking these things, might ask. I live in Iowa, and no joke, I should just look it up so I would know the number of days, but we don't have a lot of sunlight in winter here. Seasonal depression is a real thing here. So are there lights people can purchase or other things they can do if going outside and being in the sun for 10 minutes is not an option?
Yes. I'm glad you asked that question, because that comes up a lot. So what I will sometimes do, and I'm one of those people that wakes up like at 5 a.m. and the sun's not out for another couple hours. So I have a light box, and you can look, they're really inexpensive. They're, make $50 or so. Mm-hmm. And if you want to find one online, you can just Google SAD lamp, which is seasonal affective disorder, or light box. You basically want to get one that's like 10,000 lux, and lux is LUX. And what you can do is you can put that somewhere where you're going to be sitting or standing in the morning. A lot of people will put it in their bathroom as they're getting ready for work in the morning. You could put it in front of you on the kitchen counter if you're eating breakfast or whatever you're doing. If you're reading or if you're, doing your journaling, put it right in front of you. Mine's actually literally right above me right now, trying to give me light for this interview. I'm trying to rig it, but it's up there. I won't take it down because everything will come crashing down. But I highly recommend the use of a light box in lieu of the natural sun. Now, the natural sun is going to give you much better benefits, but the light box can come in handy in a pinch.
Great. And I love the simple tip of getting up at the same time every day.
Yes.
Which also means at night, have a routine at night that's similar if possible.
Yes. So the nighttime routine is really important as well. And now if you are making the practice regularly of getting up at the same time every morning, what's going to end up happening is you're going to be sleepy around the same time each night. So once we wake up, a little timer goes off, and about 16 hours later is when we're ready to sleep. So if you're consistent in the morning, you can expect yourself to have that mirrored consistency at night. And one of the things that I like to tell people is, have a bedtime window, but don't necessarily say, I'm going to go to sleep at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, because if you are not sleepy at that designated time and you get into bed, you could end up finding yourself very stressed out because you're not ready for sleep. So use those cues of sleepiness at night, the yawning, the eyes drooping, like, when you're very, very sleepy. That's when you get into bed. And so what I recommend folks do is that they're prepared to actually go into bed by like washing their face and brushing their teeth well in advance of that time period. Because I know it sounds very strange, but what can happen to a lot of people is that they become sleepy. They're on the couch or whatever, they're sleepy, and they're like, okay, I've got to go to bed. They go to the bathroom, they turn on the bright lights, and they start to brush their teeth. And that bright light and the activation of brushing their teeth, albeit not a very strenuous activity, alerts them enough to the fact to maybe have a second wind, and then they lose that sleepiness wave. So like get prepared to sleep, like by doing all those things you need to do, and then doing whatever wind down activity you find relaxing. Now, this is an interesting topic because everyone has their own personal preference as to what they find relaxing. And I will share, and a lot of people raise their eyebrows when they hear this, but my evening routine for winding down is watching TV. A lot of people are like, well, you're a sleep coach, you watch TV. So let me explain. Let me like devilify watching TV before you sleep. You can do it successful as a way to wind down if you do it in a certain way. And so the way that I recommend doing it is actually sitting in front of a regular TV, like a legitimate TV set, and sitting fairly far back from the TV so that you're not like up. A lot of times people will get their iPad or their laptop and have it right against their, sitting on their lap. That's like too close to have that light on you. Another thing is really the content of what you're watching, I find, is probably the most impactful. Content that is stimulating, scary, controversial, that can get you riled up. I mean, I've had this happen to me multiple times, like getting shaken up by something that was disturbing does impact a lot of people's sleep. So you need to make sure that you're choosing content that is like light, funny, neutral, like personally cooking shows and things like that, or like, I think great things to watch before you go to bed, because they're not like scary or, I wouldn't watch the news. Definitely wouldn't watch the news. So, finding whatever that is for you, it could be reading, it could be journaling, meditating, yoga. I mean, you just have to figure out for yourself what that activity looks like.
What are your thoughts on the light glasses? So they're almost like sunglasses. They're specifically made to wear starting at a certain time in the evening and then throughout the evening, because it starts that whole process, chemical cascade. You talk about your circadian rhythm, getting you ready so that if you do go into the bathroom and accidentally flip on the light, your brain isn't taking that in.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. I am a big fan of blue light blocking glasses. I wear them in the evening. After dinner, I put on a pair. And then when I'm watching TV, I put on a darker red pair. There is a little bit of, I guess, controversy or, mixed thoughts on how well these work. And sometimes your mileage may vary according to your own makeup as to how well these work. But I do feel like even if there is a placebo effect, it's a worthwhile intervention because it's just a pair of glasses. They're not super expensive. And I personally find that I get sleepy when I put on the red pair within like a half hour. So I start to be very sleepy, even while I'm watching the TV. So I do recommend them for at least someone to try.
Yeah. What do you say to people? Well, this would be me. So I'm not one of those that lays in bed. I'm one of those, no joke. My husband's like, I don't even know how you go to sleep that fast. Like my head hits the pillow and within 30 seconds, I am like, I'm out. I don't hear anything. I'm so deep in sleep fast. And it doesn't matter. I could go upstairs and lay in bed at 8 o'clock at night and it'd be a very similar situation.
Yeah. Well, so with that, what we generally say with people who are falling asleep within 5 minutes, it could be a sign of sleep deprivation. Not in all cases.
Yeah.
But sometimes we do wonder a little bit about people who are like literally out like a light. That might be something to think a little bit more about. Everyone's different. So we don't want to like jump to conclusions about every single person who falls asleep quickly. But generally speaking, like a healthy amount of time to fall asleep is usually like 10 or 20 minutes.
Okay. And what do you tell people that wake up and this will be a certain time of the month during my cycle, I'll have a day or a night or two where I'll wake up and I'm wide awake, 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not going back to sleep. My brain is and I'm in and out. If I close my eyes, I don't go back into a deep sleep. So like some friends, if I allowed myself, I'd get up and tell people I didn't sleep at all. When in reality, I did.
Right.
I was just in a very, very light sleep. So what are your recommendations to people on mindset around those nights?
Yeah, this is a big one. So if you're prone to that kind of wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and you start to worry during that wake up period, a really helpful exercise to do is called the constructive worry exercise. So I'll tell you how to do it. So usually after dinner is when most of my clients end up doing this. What you do is you take a piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle of the sheet of paper. On the left-hand side, you write worries, column of worries or problems. And then on the right-hand side of the column, solutions. And you just brain dump for about 15, 20 minutes, all of the things that are bothering you. And they can be really small things, or they could be like global things. You know, if it's something like I have a flat tire, you write a flat tire. What are you going to do the next day? Okay, you're going to take it to the wherever, gas station or whatever you're going to do. If it's something more global, like you're worried about a world crisis, you'll just say on the other hand of the column, like, there's nothing I can do about this. You know, you just acknowledge that and move on. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that you take that piece of paper, you could fold it up and put it on your bedside table, but you're getting all of these things out on paper before you go to sleep so that they are not as apt to come into your head and flood your brain when you wake up in the middle of the night. So that is a really effective tactic for a lot of people who struggle with that. Another thing that people will sometimes try, and it works, you know, it works fairly well for a lot of people, but some people are not willing to do it. But it's basically getting out of bed if you are lying there frustrated and not able to sleep. And what you would do is you would go into another room around dim light and do something quiet and relaxing until you become sleepy again. And then you get back into bed. So that you use that time just to do something enjoyable for yourself. You don't get mad, and it just takes you. The last thing you want to do is have your bed paired with worry. You want to separate those two. Yeah.
So you're not going to bed fearful of what am I going to worry about tonight when I wake up. That makes sense. So we're coming to the end. And so I'd like you to share just in a couple of minutes, this journey that you've been on. And we could spend so much time here. And, just, your cancer journey twice, the things, you've learned, and, wellness is definitely your passion. I'd call you a wellness warrior for sure. So many great things on sleep, but there's so much more about you, who you are, your gifts, what you're sharing, with the world, how you're impacting. Give me your top 2 things over the course, of this journey of life that you've been on, your top 2 things that have been the most impactful for you in the journey.
Yeah. Well, I think really just 2 breast cancer diagnoses. I mean, those 2 were very impactful and the first one was a massive wake-up call as to how I was living, right? I don't know exactly why I got breast cancer in the first place, but I have some ideas. I have some theories. And ultimately, I think a lot of it boils down to what I was doing as far as like ingesting things that were not good for me. Processed foods. I mean, I've always been, quote, looked at as healthy. I use air quotes when I say healthy, but the things that I was doing for health were quite honestly driven by wanting to look good. So let me just give an example of what that looks like. So I would have maybe a pint of this kind of fake processed low-cal ice cream, because it was low calorie and I knew I wanted to stay within a certain calorie range, which now I'm not even counting calories, but the processed foods, having a lot of those, they're not real foods. Yeah. I think that impacted, my physiology and my susceptibility to getting sick. I think that having products on my body that were hormone disruptors was an issue. I switched my makeup and my skincare completely.
So an awakening is the word that I keep hearing. You had an awakening.
It was a massive awakening. And it really changed the way I chose things moving forward with my health. Which
is now playing out in all the things that you do, which is the beautiful part of the journey. It's when we can awaken to where we've been and what we've done, that maybe we've made choices and things we shouldn't have, and we're unaware of the consequences of those choices. But when we can look at those things, reflect on them, and change them and move forward in a different way, I think that's when we get to make the greatest impact, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of others.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I want the listeners to be able to find you, so that if, they want to go deeper with, their own sleep habits and how to shift and change those, or they're on a journey, but it's not working, and they would, want to explore something different to do that. Just any of the things you're doing, or they're a breast cancer survivor and they want to, meet with you about that and pick your brain. I know it's not necessarily where you're doing your coaching right now, but, just like me, if someone needs to, pick my brain about what I've done and where I've been or how I've done that, I'm always open to do that too. So where can they find you?
Yes. So my website is morganadamswellness.com.
Okay. We'll share that on the screen here.
Okay. And on my website, you can find a way to sign up for my free mini course called the Sleep Reset Solution. You can also schedule a complimentary sleep clarity call with me to discuss any sleep issue you might be having. And again, if somebody does have breast cancer, I'm frequently referred to by people when their friend gets diagnosed. They frequently say, you need to talk to Morgan. So I'm also very willing to share, my journey and give my, it's not professional advice, because that's not really my thing, but just sharing an experience or, helping somebody, being an ear, I'm always open to that as well.
Yeah. And I think that's important as we navigate, our own journey. I think it's important to talk to other people. It isn't that we take everything that we learn from one person and utilize it, but maybe there's a piece that they learned from you and a piece that they learned from someone else. And then we put those pieces together to create, our own healing path, whatever that might look like. So yeah. Well, it has been a joy having you here. Love getting to know you. I love the work that you're doing. I'm super excited to share things. Sleep is at the top of my list for a while. I always learn. I have several things that I've written down that I've learned. I'm excited to listen and learn more and continue to connect people to and share. Thank you for the work you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Appreciate it.
Thank you to the listeners for joining us today. You can find us every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time here on Aging Like a Badass. Have a great week.
This is Kimberly Price, your 40-something host of Aging Like a Badass. See you every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4WN Radio, as we come together to break the rules, ignore the critics, and age like a badass.